Gentlemen, I'm honoured to be joined with you once again. Today we're going to be talking about something that is becoming ever so more important in the current day and age with all the conflicts going around in the world. Now, I'm not going to be talking about that in this video, but one of the most important things that a lot of people are starting to overlook when they really should be starting to look at this would be which countries around the world have mandatory military service. Because when we talk about diversifying our passport portfolios, we also have to understand that maybe mandatory military service is a major red flag. It certainly is for me. Any country that claims that to prove your loyalty, you have to serve there, in my eyes, that's just not a good way to do things there. The best way to have an army is to have people who actually want to serve in the army fight there. Not to have everyone be forced to do it. Because if everyone's forced to do it, they're not going to enjoy doing it. It's not about them enjoying it. It's also about the quality that they produce out. So, in general, mandatory military service is an absolutely asinine concept. It really is. But in general, when we talk about diversifying, there are many green flag countries around the world that still have mandatory military service. Some of them are red flag countries, might not be interested in some of them, but it is monumentally important to know which countries around the world, specifically in the Western world, still maintain a type of mandatory military service or conscription, because it's a make or break deal when it comes to diversifying your passport portfolio and maintaining your right to be a sovereign individual. So starting off with the first country, this country is in Europe, but it is not in the European Union. However, it is in the Schengen zone. That would be Switzerland. Switzerland has a great reputation around the world. The only major people who really hate Switzerland in the modern day, to be fair, are people who are probably jealous that they can't move there, in all honesty. Is Switzerland the place for me? No, but I certainly do not hate Switzerland. I just have more countries that I prefer instead of Switzerland. But I'm sure it's a beautiful country. I'm sure it does work for many people there, but Switzerland does have mandatory military service for men only here. So if you're a woman looking to diversify, Switzerland might still be a good option here. But if you're a woman who might have a son in the future, something like that, it might be a red flag and even so a deal breaker for you. Switzerland has mandatory military service. Now, to be honest, although I'm not a huge fan of the idea, Switzerland is also a country that, apart from going abroad to the Vatican City, doesn't really get involved in any foreign conflicts whatsoever here. So the mandatory military service, most of the time, unless they are going to the Vatican, they're going to stay domestically. I don't believe it should be mandatory, but if they only want to have mandatory military service for domestic defense, I'm not going to back that all the way, but it's certainly a lot better for just domestic defense purposes only. The next one on this list would actually be a European Union country, and I've spoken about this numerous times on this channel before being a monumental deal breaker. Of course, it is not only a deal breaker because of the mandatory military service, they also don't allow dual nationality. That would be Estonia. And now when I talk about Estonia, I'm also going to include the other two Baltic nations in this list, because although Latvia is a little bit more lenient, Lithuania is a little bit lenient too, they both have a form of mandatory military service. Now they justify this by saying, look at who our neighbour is to the east. I understand that, absolutely. But I don't view this notion of just because you have a big imperialist neighbour that you should force a random person, a random civilian, to serve in an army that is an enemy, a potential enemy of that neighbour. As a sovereign individual, I believe you should have the right to decide who your enemies are and who your enemies are not. I don't believe it's a great idea to let any country tell you that you have to hate a whole nation of people. You have to love this nation of people and you also have to hate this nation of people. As a sovereign individual, we should all look at people as individuals, not based upon their nationality or anything like that. I reject that hypothesis completely here, which is why I say that while a lot of people might have a problem with their big eastern neighbour, I'm certainly not a backer of them, but to judge the whole nation just because they were born in that country is absolutely asinine here. And of course, Estonia, of course, has, I've numerous times talked about it on this channel, they do have mandatory military service here. Now again, citizenship in Estonia and Switzerland is pretty difficult to get. It's not something that the majority of people are getting here, but it's still something worth looking at. Because I hear numerous times, specifically Americans, talking about the fact that they want to go to a nice European country that's a little bit different from the United States, and they always bring up Switzerland here. Now, Switzerland is certainly different from the US, absolutely. But just be aware that if you actually have the vision of becoming a naturalized Swiss citizen, you might want to think about, do you want to serve in the Swiss military? Do you want your children to serve in the Swiss military? Again, not major red flags, they usually stay domestically, but still it is worth something thinking. It is something worth thinking about, because me personally, I don't know if I'm willing to make that deal either with myself or with my future children. Absolutely not. The next one on this list would be Norway. Not a European Union member country, but in the Schengen area here, and quite another common country for a lot of people who might want to get a stronger passport to go to. A lot of people are leaving Norway, though to be honest, I won't say it's a popular expat hub, to be honest, but Norway does have a conscription policy. It isn't mandatory, and the majority of Norwegian citizens do not actually serve in the military like they might do in a country like Finland, for example. But Norway has a policy of equality. Now, I'm all about being equal. Equal human rights is absolutely great, but they've done it in the opposite way. Norway, in regards to their policy of equality, have also introduced conscription for women too. How sweet, how kind. Thank you so much for making everyone equal. Here, what if you just abolished it for everyone instead? That would be a much preferred option here, because it's all well and good saying we believe in equality, so let's also violate the human rights of women too. I don't believe that's a very good idea, to be honest. So my position is, if you want to generally have an equal society here, where no human rights are violated, no one's forced to do anything they don't want to do, then I'd say maybe abolish it completely, not also make women suffer as well. That makes absolutely no sense to me. So Norway, it's not mandatory military service like it would be in Estonia or Finland or Switzerland or maybe another country like Israel, for example, where everyone has to serve in the military. But they do have a form of conscription, which in on itself is, for me, still a red flag. Now, again, Norwegian citizenship, actually quite difficult to get, to be fair, if you're not from a fellow Nordic country. And again, as well, as I said earlier, Norway is not a major common expat hub, but it still is worth something thinking about here, because I hear, again, like with Switzerland, a lot of Americans going, if I move to Norway, all my problems will be solved. Now, some American problems might be solved, yes, but not every problem will be solved. In fact, just like with any country, you lose some problems, but you gain some problems as well. And it's all up to you, the sovereign individual, to decide, are those problems worth dealing with? There are other countries around the world which are very obvious. You know, Israel has mandatory military service. An interesting one here, Kazakhstan has mandatory military service for men, which I am quite surprised about. I knew Russia and Ukraine had, but I didn't anticipate Kazakhstan to also have mandatory military service for men here, which is actually quite surprising. To be fair, I was not anticipating that. In many countries around the world, South Korea being another one too, do have it. A lot of countries around the world do have it, and in my eyes, the majority of countries, except just a few that have mandatory military service, are major deal breakers here. In my mind, there are only 3 countries that come to mind that have a form of conscription or mandatory service that I kind of like those countries. I don't know if I'd want to naturalize in them, but they're not as big of a deal for me, to be honest, because of the reasons like they usually keep their military domestically for domestic protection. That's A. B, the service isn't that bad based upon their reputation, and in general, it's something that I could sort of back in a way. I'd never back it fully. I'd never understand, I'd never endorse a mandatory military service or anything mandatory being implemented anywhere, anytime. But there are about 3 countries around the world where I could somewhat understand it. I wouldn't agree with it, but their logic, I could understand why they think that way, but I would always think a different way, of course, and that's my right to, of course, as the sovereign individual here. Let me know whether for you it is important whether a country has mandatory military service or not. Are you pro-conscription or are you anti-conscription? Let me know down in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button, be sure to subscribe to the channel as well. We'll hopefully see you in the next one, but until then, as always, eternal victory to the free people.